Thank you. Members, any questions for Emily? Thank you very much. I believe we have the sponsor of the bill here, Representative Finchem, and if you'd like to say a word or two.
Thank you very much, Chairman, members. I think I'm going to start with, if you don't mind, I believe you have a paper handout. Did that go out, Chairman? Okay, I'll dispense with the PowerPoint presentation then. The first thing that I want to do is open with, when this Morgan silver dollar was minted by the U.S. government, it was $1. $1. Okay? Today, this same coin is equal to $20. And I think that we have all, since childhood, heard about the idea of inflation. What the IRS has figured out at the federal level is how to tax inflation as a gain. They call it capital gains because they want to say that you buy this with this. The truth couldn't be any further than away from that position. This is an exchange of one type of currency for another. So what this bill seeks to do, and I'm not going to belabor the point because I'd like to get to our guest who would like to talk to honest money. Basically, it allows for, we remove, at least in the state of Arizona, the taxable feature of exchanges of one type of currency for another. Now, you may hear something from Department of Revenue that this is very difficult to do, but at the end of the day, we are the policy setting body. And when the mechanics of money come in conflict with the mechanics of government, yes, they're going to butt heads. But I think that we've got a grand opportunity in this case to at least protect, at some small level, the opportunity for Arizona residents to protect their investment. Actually, it's a conversion of one type of currency for another because of a lack of trust. Now, one of the things that I'd like to call your attention to in that document that I have sent to you is the idea that there's been this quiet theft going on over time. You'll notice the document that has a house, has eggs, has hard money, and then has fiat currency. I find it interesting that in 1957, a 1,600 square foot house would cost roughly the equivalent of 37,700 eggs, which would be 13,500 silver dollars, which in that day would have been 13,500 silver certificates. Now today we move forward to, and this is just 2007 because this is when this was prepared, that same house would still cost the equivalent of 37,700 eggs. And it would still be roughly 13,500 silver dollars. However, in Federal Reserve notes, it would be $175,000. That's called inflation. So when somebody takes that $13,500 in silver dollars and exchanges them for Federal Reserve notes, the IRS says that that's a taxable event. But that's the exact same organization that is charged with the responsibility for supporting the value of currency. Currency meaning the paper Federal Reserve note. Now, the last thing that I'll mention is that on this, what we call dollar bill, the very top, it says Federal Reserve note. I'm a real estate agent, so let me put this in real estate terms because I know just about everybody here should have a house. If you don't, I would be happy to talk to you about it. When you purchase a house, unless you pay cash for that house, you have a deed of trust, which is evidence that you have ownership, fee simple ownership in that property, that real property, and you have a note, that's your purchase property note. That is the evidence of the loan, which by way of definition, a note is an evidence of debt. So what we're really doing is we're trading thin slices that are evidence of debt daily, pretending that it's money. And until you extinguish this debt with the exchange for something that is real, you are the carrier of the debt of the federal government. So to assume that you have been carrying the debt for the federal government for however long and move that into real property, that you should suffer a tax consequence for that exchange of currency authorized by the U.S. Constitution, minted by the U.S. Mint, or printed by the Federal Reserve. Until you extinguish that debt, you remain the carrier of debt. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Members, any questions for the sponsor? Thank you very much. Apparently you did an excellent job.
Thank you, Mr.
Appreciate that. And I just want to make a comment before we move forward that I am very supportive of this bill. Each of us sponsored a bill last year, and we know that here in Arizona we've been trying to get this done for a number of years, and our bills have been vetoed by the governor how many times now? 3 times, 4 times, something like that. We lost track. But thank you so much for bringing this bill, and appreciate your work on it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. We have a very special guest here who now we do have him signed in. And Dr. Ron Paul is a former 12-term congressman and candidate for president of the United States and physician. He is also the nation's leading voice for limited government, individual liberty, and sound money. Since leaving Congress in 2013, Dr. Paul has kept busy with the Campaign for Liberty, the Ron Paul Institute, and his daily online Liberty Report. And I know we said very little. We could go on for an hour, but we'd rather listen to you. Welcome, Dr. Ron Paul. We appreciate you being here.
Mr. Chairman and panel, I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to come here to visit, because I consider what you're doing is very important, not only for your state and for the issue of money, but for an understanding about some of our problems in this country. And it's an issue that I have worked on for a long time. Matter of fact, it was in 1971 when we sort of deserted all monetary sense with the breakdown of the Bretton Woods and just separating the dollar completely from gold is when I got interested in talking about economic policy. So I'm delighted to be able to come here and visit with you a bit, and I really want to congratulate you for this, because I think of this in a couple terms. You know, in Washington, one of my biggest complaints in Washington was the complaint with Congress. I was a member, but I was complaining because they were always delivering the prerogatives, the responsibilities to somebody else, to the bureaucrats, to international organization, and they would give it to the executive branch, and they never accepted their responsibility. On the monetary issues, the states are talked about in the Constitution, and they have restrictions. They can't print money, but they also have been told in the Constitution that they can only use gold and silver as legal tender. So the responsibility is on the states to follow the rules, and that meant nobody was supposed to use anything other than silver, gold, and gold as legal tender. But we've had a mess. It's gotten worse. It started in 1913. There was a sort of a climactic end in 1971, but the problems have continued. And if you look at some of the charts, things have been really rocky since 71 with the destruction of the value of the money. Since 1971, we've lost 95% of the value of the dollar. And the tragedy there is that the average person, the middle class, gets wiped out. Austrian economics teaches that if you destroy the currency, you will destroy the middle class, and people who will get the money that the government prints, which they shouldn't be allowed to do, goes into the pockets of the bankers and the corporations. And when the people get the money, their prices go up, and they wonder why they're getting behind. Well, my wages went up $5, $10. No, they need to be $15, but they're looking in the wrong place. It's the monetary issue that it is the real problem. So what you're doing here, the way I understand it, is you're suggesting that maybe we ought not to tax money. And I think that's a good idea, because I'd like to not tax a lot of things, but certainly it makes no sense to tax money. And that is what I understand you're trying to stop, because if you have currency transactions across the world, they don't measure the value of the dollar. Oh, your dollar value went up, so we're going to tax you on the increase of your value. So no, you don't get taxed for that. So the tax issue has been used. Matter of fact, the very early history was they used the tax issue to more or less justify the second national bank, which got us off on the wrong track because they called it a tax issue rather than a monetary issue. But very explicitly, you know, the Congress is allowed to coin money. One time in a banking committee hearing, they were arguing the case that in the Constitution they were given the authority to print money at will. And I wrote in my dissenting view that show me. It says you're not allowed to coin money, but that's how. But they just did that. They came to believe that they had the authority to print money. They don't have the authority to print money, and the states can only use silver and gold as legal tender. And in Article 10, where they mention that you can only use gold and silver, the very next sentence is you can't counterfeit the securities or the coin of the United States. And I often wondered if we'd have ever enforced the law of the 1792, the very first Coinage Act. It said that anybody that did commit counterfeit could get the death penalty. And I often thought, boy, I don't know if they'll ever get around to enforcing that. That'd be a lot of problems. But that's how seriously they felt about this, because they had the runaway inflation with the continental dollar, and subsequently they tried to keep the central banks out. Jefferson got rid of the first central bank, and Jackson got rid of the second national bank, and we're waiting on the third one to fall. But it's the issue of money, and I think this tax issue is very important. I like the idea of competing currencies, and in my ideas about getting back to normal, you probably can't turn a switch under today's condition and say, well, tomorrow it's going to be like the old days. It doesn't work. But you could move gradually back if you have competing currencies. So I often introduce legislation for competing currencies, and what you're doing here would be very helpful. It would be legalizing competition in a constitutional fashion. It isn't like saying, okay, Arizona wants to print their paper currency again, because you're not allowed to do that, but you're allowed to try to make it competitive. And I think this is very important. I think it's important for what you're doing. It's an important issue. It could help your state, and there's a lot of benefits. But to me, since I'm in the education business as much as the political business, I think what you're doing here is just great. I think if this passes, people are going to know about this. Other states are already involved. There's going to be a lot more. So this is where the responsibility of government ought to be. I like the idea to come to a state legislative body, because I think the authority should be here with the states, not at the federal level. Their job is to mess things up. And our job, your job at the state level, is to try to clean up the mess. But this would be historic, and it'll be noticed. It'll be a good step in the right direction. And I am very pleased with what's been happening, because in the 1970s, I was motivated by the breakdown of the gold standard in 1971. If anybody remembers the 70s, we had interest rates at 21%, inflation rate of 15%, and I thought the monetary issue was important, because it is the monetary debasement that allows governments, federal governments, to spend more money than they have, and they print it. Then they can have a welfare warfare state and no responsibility. So that's what fascinated me about the monetary issue. And I think that there'll come a day when it's absolutely necessary that we do it. Conditions will get so bad, so the more understanding there is. I am always delighted when so many young people are interested in this issue, because many young people will be inheriting this problem and trying to sort it out. But it's really not too difficult. It isn't something because Ron Paul likes the gold standard. Believe me, the gold standard was invented a long, long time ago, from the beginning of recorded history. 5,000 years ago, they used gold and silver. Biblically, gold and silver, real weights and measures. That's what they counted by. So this is not brand new. It's the governments and the people who seek power are always undermining the restraints placed on governments by honest money. So I congratulate you for hearing and dealing with this bill, because I think if you do pass this bill, it will be a great step forward for a lot of people to understand the money issue and the freedom issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Paul. Before you leave the podium,